Now, while we have Node Exporter enabled on one of our instances, our app server, we will go ahead to configure our Prometheus server to automatically pick the metrics that are coming from this given server. Remember, this is our app server where we've installed Node Exporter, and Node Exporter is able to export these given metrics. Now, you see the metrics is not some information which you can easily understand, but note we are going to be collecting these metrics from our target web server, which is our app server, to the Prometheus server. Basically, we are going to be collecting the metrics from this server, which is our app server, into our Prometheus server. For us to do that, let's begin by selecting our Prometheus server. We click on connect to our Prometheus server. You copy the SSH details for your Prometheus server. We copy the SSH details for the Prometheus server. We come back to our terminal. We can kill this session. You can press Ctrl C and you type exit to kill this session for the previous installation. Remember, previously we were installing Node Exporter on our target server, so we can clear this because we are no longer installing this on our target server. Now, for us to configure Prometheus to connect to our target app server, we will have to SSH into the Prometheus server. So let's SSH into the Prometheus server. We SSH into the Prometheus server using the commands. Now, once you SSH into the Prometheus server, you need to access our Prometheus configuration file. The Prometheus configuration file is found in this directory. If you cd into etc Prometheus, remember this directory was specified when we were creating our Prometheus server, the etc Prometheus. If you see into this directory and you do an ls, you will see a prometheus.yaml file. Now, this file was configured. Remember, if you come to our installation repository, our Grafana, Prometheus and Grafana learning repository, if you click on Prometheus and Grafana setups, and then you come to the install prometheus.sh, install prometheus.sh, if you take note, we create a file in line 14. I previously mentioned we should take reference to this. In line 14, we are creating this file, the prometheus.yaml file, which is the configuration file which Prometheus uses. We are going to be updating this file to be able to take note of our target. So if you want to know more about the Prometheus configuration file, you can ask maybe on Google, you can ask what is a Prometheus.yaml file. So if you check what Prometheus.yaml file, you can get more details. You can look at configuration. You can select the first link, which is giving us a little bit more details on the configuration file. Basically, the Prometheus.yaml file is a config file, the configuration file which you use to specify all the settings as far as Prometheus is concerned. So these are the details of the configuration file. You specify a lot more details, but it's summarized. So you can have script config, assuming you want to do some form of service discovery or whatever. So basically, the YAML file which we have, the Prometheus.yaml file, is the configuration file. So the configuration file is written in YAML. If you come to our server here, this Prometheus.yaml is the configuration file which Prometheus uses. So if you cut this Prometheus.yaml file, you basically see this. You have global, we have script interval, script configs. Now, if you come back to this configuration file, this is the basic details as far as configuration file for Prometheus is concerned. If you click on script configs gives you, they say the script config is a section that specifies a set of targets and parameters describing how to scrape them. Scraping basically means collecting data from them. The documentation says targets may be statically configured via static configs parameter or dynamically configured using one of the supported service discovery mechanisms. So if you come here, the script configs as we have could be done using static configuration or dynamically using service discovery, which we are going to see subsequently. So if you come, it says you can use static configs parameter. In this case, we already have the static configs parameter, and the static configs parameter is used to configure targets. So they say targets may be statically configured via the static configs parameter. So in this case, we have our script configs where we have static configurations to get the various information from our target servers. Currently, the only target we have is the local host, and it's listening on port 9090. That is why if you come back to your Prometheus server here, to our Prometheus server, you will see we are only listening to localhost port 9090, and it's collecting metrics only from this port 9090. So for us to add targets, we come back to our Prometheus.yaml file. This is our Prometheus.yaml file. Take note, the global settings basically The script interval is after how long, what's the duration before you want to collect the next set of metrics, which is configured here for 15 seconds. Means after every 15 seconds, Prometheus will get new metrics. And then equally, we have external labels where we are going to label the console. So if you come to the console here, this is the label. The label we have here is a Prometheus, and it's the same label which we have here, Prometheus. Well, basically to label the console. Now, for our script configs, we need to edit this file to add a new target, which is our app server. So for us to do that, sudo vi, type the command sudo vi, and then you get into the prometheus.yaml file. You do sudo vi prometheus.yaml file and you hit enter. So if you do sudo vi prometheus.yaml file, you'll be able to get this configuration. And for you to edit this configuration file, you get in insert mode by typing I, and then you come here to where we have targets. You move your cursor to the side. In the place of localhost, you put a comma, and then we are going to add a new target. The new target we are adding now is the app server. So you take colon, you come to our console. On our console, you can come to instances. You cancel this. You can cancel this filter. You come to instances. Let's refresh this to get all our servers. Once you refresh that, under instances, you select the app server. You copy the app server public IP. You copy the app server public IP. You come back to our terminal where we're editing the Prometheus.yaml file. You paste the app server public IP. You take colon, and now if you take note here, for us to be able to access this is the link which we use. This was a public IP, and then we're listening on port 9100. It's the same configuration which we are going to do here. This is the public IP, and then we are listening on port 9100. Once you configure that, you close this. So take note, this is how the configuration file should look like. You have the local host to specify the local Prometheus server, and then the new target, which is our app server. Once you do that, you exit insert mode, and for you to save this, you type colon w cure and then the inverted comma. So you do colon w cure, or you could just do colon x, but we do colon w cure and you hit enter. So this would have updated our prometheus.yaml file. If you cut the new file, if you cut the prometheus.yaml file again, you will see previously this was the previous prometheus.yaml file where we had just the local host. But now once you do this upgrade and you cut the file, you will see we now have our local host, and then we've added our app server. Once you add the server, you now want to refresh or restart the Prometheus server for it to now make use of the new configurations which you've set up as far as this Prometheus server is concerned. So we are going to do a sudo systemctl. So do sudo systemctl restart Prometheus service. So basically what we are doing is we are restarting the Prometheus server to take into consideration this new configuration file. Once you do that and you hit enter, it's going to automatically restart the Prometheus server. Now if you come back to our Prometheus server and you refresh, under targets, you see we now have a new target has been added. So initially we had the local host, and we initially we had just the local host, but if you look now, a new target or a new server or a new endpoint has been added. If you refresh this again, you will see both endpoints are up. If you click this, you see we can automatically access our app server directly from the Prometheus console. So we've automatically configured our Prometheus server to automatically pick up a new target, which is our app server. Now for us to test how node exporter works with Prometheus, we are still going to come back to this our prometheus.yaml file. Let me clear. If you cut our prometheus.yaml file, we currently have the app server. This is the public IP of the app server, and then we have the local host for the Prometheus server. We are still going to vi into this file, or we are still going to get into this file and add the web server. We will get into this file and add the web server. So do sudo vi prometheus.yaml. Now we have both the local host for the Prometheus server and the app server. Now let's add the web server. For us to do that, again, we get into insert mode by typing I. Once we type I, we move the cursor in front, we put comma, and then now you put semicolon, you put the colon, well, you put the inverted comma, and then now we come to our EC2 instances, we select web server. Previously we added just the app server. Take note, in our web server, we have not yet installed node exporter, but we are going to be adding this server to our prometheus.yaml file. So we collect the public IP, we collect the public IP. Once we collect the public IP, we come back to our prometheus.yaml file, we paste the public IP, and then we put colon 9100 to signify the Prometheus port. Take note, the first first is for the Prometheus server. This is for the app server, which we have Node Exporter installed, and then the second is for the web server, which we do not have Node Exporter installed at this moment. So once you do this, you want to save this file, you exit insert, or you exit the insert mode, you do type wcure and then the bin bash. You do wcure and then the bin bash, and you hit enter. So if you cut our Prometheus.yaml file, we'll now see we have previously we had just our targets were localhost and our app server, but now we have the local host, the app server, and the web server. Once we have these three configurations, what we now need to do is we do the sudo systemctl restart prometheus.service. We are restarting the service to be able to pick up the new updates which we have in our configuration file. Now if you hit enter and you come back to our Prometheus server, so we come back to our Prometheus server here, we are going to refresh this tab. If you refresh this tab, you take note we have three servers. Previously we had two, our Prometheus server and our app server. Now we've added the web server. If you refresh the tab, you see we have our local host for our Prometheus server up and accessible. We have our app server up and accessible. If you click here, you'll be able to go directly to the app server logs. But now if you look at the last server which we added, which is our web server, if you click on it, it tells you you cannot access the site because we cannot access metrics on this. So this server, in as much as we have added into our Prometheus configuration file as a target, because we do not have Node Exporter installed on this server, we do not have the possibility to collect logs from this server. So for us to collect logs, all we need to do is we can come back to our terminal, we can exit this, we can exit our Prometheus server, and then we come to our EC2 instance console. We select the web server. Remember, you're on the web server. We click on connect. We SSH into the web server. We select the web server credentials. You can clear our screen here, and then we SSH into the web server. So for us to SSH into the web server, we just paste the command SSH that, and we hit enter. Once we hit enter, we take yes. We take yes to SSH into the web server. If you do an ls, we do not have any configuration here in this server. So we're going to begin again on the web server, just like we did for the app server. We are going to install Git on this server. So for us to install Git on the server, we do sudo yum install git-y. So we do sudo yum install git-y and you hit enter. So this should install Git in this server. Now once the Git installation is complete, we can come to our repository. Again, we are still using this repository. We click on Prometheus and Grafana Learning. You click on code. You copy this code. We are copying this code because it contains all of our setups. Once you copy this code, you come back to your server. You can clear our screen, and then we do git clone and we paste the link to the repository for us to be able to get the code. Now if you do an ls, you see we have Prometheus and Grafana Learning. If you cd into Prometheus and Grafana, if you do an ls here, you see Prometheus and Grafana setups. So we still need to cd into Prometheus and Grafana setups. If you do a pwd, you see we have Prometheus and Grafana Learning, Prometheus and Grafana setups. If you do an ls here, you should be able to see install grafana.sh, install node exporter.sh, install prometheus.sh. Now our target is for us to install node exporter in our web server. So for us to install node exporter in our web server, we do an sh and then we type install, we press tab, node, press tab. So basically we are going to run this command install sh, meaning we want to run a shell script. We do sh install node exporter.sh, and once you do that and you hit enter, node exporter will be installed in the web server. So if you do the installation is complete, you see we have the status active. If you come back to our EC2 console, we click back on instance. Remember, we're doing it on the web server. If you click back to this instance, this is our web server. We already did that for the app server. This is for our web server. So if you click here for the web server and you copy the web server public IP, so I'll copy the web server public IP and I paste here. Once you paste the web server public IP, you put colon 9100, you should be able to access node exporter. So we have now installed node exporter on our web server. If you click on metrics, you should also be able to see metrics being collected on our web server. We have metrics being collected on our web server. So now in our Prometheus tab, previously Prometheus had a connection refuse, meaning that Prometheus could not access any form of metrics on our web server. We had Prometheus accessing metrics. If you click here, Prometheus could access metrics only on our app server. But now we've installed, if you click here, previously Prometheus could not access. But because we've accessed, or because we've installed Node Exporter in our web server, you come to our Prometheus dashboard. If you refresh the tab, you'll now see all our 3 targets are up and healthy, meaning we've configured our Prometheus to be able to access logs for both our app server and our web server. Now, if you take note, we are using the public IPs, but for more security, you can rather replace these public IPs with your private IPs in your Prometheus.yaml file to ensure that your configuration or your Prometheus server is secure. So this is basically how we can set up Prometheus targets, or we can set up a given set of instances to act as targets for Prometheus in our given configuration file. In our next module, we are going to be setting up Prometheus service discovery.